Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cult Musical Zone. I have two very special guests. I feel honored and blessed to be able to talk to them about the criminally underrated cult musical, The Pirate Movie. So today we're going to discuss this gem of a movie. I've got my Christopher Atkins hair, if y'all can see. It's not a wig.
Not
And
permed enough.
and then we'll just jump into talking about the pirate movie. So Helena is a regular guest, and Michael's joining us all the way from New Zealand, correct?
That's right. Yeah. Capital
So-
city.
Where?
The capital, Wellington, the capital city.
Oh, I thought you said the Emerald City.
That's Sydney. Yeah, in Australia.
So what we always do when we begin this podcast is talk about our first time seeing this film. Now, I'm sure you two have a bigger history with this film and a much more magnificent history with this film than I do. So I'll let y'all talk about the first time you saw this gem.
Okay, I'll go first. So let's see. I was born in 77, so I was like 5 when this one came out. I think it came out in like 81 or 82.
I think it was 82.
Yeah. I was going to say 82 because it came out kind of. So I was going back and doing a little bit of history on this. So apparently there was sort of a fad for Gilbert and Sullivan, especially the Pirates of Penzance, because it played in Central Park in New York City. And it had basically the same cast that was in the video movie version that they made with Kevin Kline and Rex Smith and Linda Ronstadt, which loved that growing up. I mean, I know that this is about the pirate movie, but like they are inseparable for me, these two movies, because that summer of like 82 when both of those were out on VHS was also like I live in Oregon and the summer was rainy day start to finish. It was like 40 days of rain. So the entire summer was rain. And so I sat inside and I watched those two movies plus a few others, but that was like my primary viewing for that summer pretty much. So I was like saturated with both of those movies and so I loved them very, very, very much.
I had seen an ad for the film, a trailer, and thought, oh, that looks interesting. And there used to be a magazine called Coming Attractions that sort of had each page was a couple of photos from the film and basically the plot and who was in it and maybe a little bit of gossip. So I knew it was coming, and it was the end of my first year of studying at the Polytech. I think that's community college or whatever. Yeah. So I was 18, and I said I took one of my nephews and one of my nieces for Christmas. I said I will take you to the movies, and I took them to see Annie and the Pirate Movie. And I think I even had the record before I'd seen it, so I had listened to it a little, not a lot, just to sort of go, what am I letting myself in for? But I was looking forward. Oh, I see your record, and I raise you one songbook.
Fantastic.
Yes.
I would have had the Betamax too, but it's in the basement somewhere. So.
Oh. But yeah. So I was looking forward to it, and I loved it. Interestingly, the Linda Ronstadt one wasn't released here, so I didn't actually get to see it until years later. I think on video, I think it got released, and I mean it was lovely, but I actually preferred the Pirate movie to the Pirates of Penzance.
I don't have a fascinating history with it. I just have always loved cult musicals. And I saw the Pirate Movie at 15 or 15 or 16. I bought it on DVD. And the first time I watched it was in Tybee Island, Georgia during the summer. So it was like the beach. And it captivated me. And I loved it from day one. And I always compare, I think it's like on the same level of Voyage of the Rock Aliens and Grease too. I think they're so endearing. Mm-hmm. Which I have never really asked this question, but since you all were around that particular time, for them to cast Christopher Atkins and Kristy McNichol, and they were pretty big in the 80s in America because of their both of their careers. And I mean, was that basically the marketing tool that they used was Christopher Atkins, Kristy McNichol?
I think so, and it probably, like the Australian film industry, I think we'd had Mad Max by then, but and it still happens here in New Zealand as well. They would bring overseas stars in, and then sort of they used to pad it out with local people. These days, they just bring anyone they like, and you know, maybe two Kiwis get to be third Hobbit from the left type thing. But they were entirely the reason. I think Pirates of Penzance was big on Broadway, and they were going to make a movie of that, and there was a race to see which one would get made first. And I think the pirate movie came out first.
6 months before, I think, from what I was reading.
Okay, yeah. And because I guess that music is in the public domain, the Pirates of Penzance music, no one can stop them making a Pirates of Penzance movie.
It was fair game. Yeah.
She was big. Oh, sorry. She was big because of Family. Do you remember Family? There was this TV series called Family, and she won Emmys at like 13 and 14 because she was amazing. And then she'd done Little Darlings, which I think is probably the first movie I cried in. I think that's why and like I would have been 14 or 15 and boys don't cry, but I remember there's a scene in that film and I remember thinking, goodness, this is quite moving. And I did later see a film she did called The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, which do I give a link to that one? Because I've looked at it on DVD and it's going to be like $70 or $80, and it's like I can't really justify spending that. But so she was big. He'd only done The Blue Lagoon, as far as I know, but that was a huge hit here. I think everywhere probably.
Yeah, everywhere. Yeah. I was going to add too. So Christy McNichol and her brother Peter McNichol, they were twins, or like fraternal twins. So as a duo, they were very like teeny bopper popular in like the late 70s, mid late 70s. Because over Christmas time, I was watching like Donnie and Marie's Christmas special, the Carpenters Christmas special. You know, you love all those kind of things. And I noticed like, oh, there's Christy and Peter McNichol at like 78, 77, kind of before this. So I think they had a little bit of kind of build up behind them, and her in particular, because she had been a TV star.
Yes.
And then, of course, Christopher Atkins had just come off of The Blue Lagoon, which was huge. As John Waters says, he loves that movie because it's a real nude Christopher Atkins and a fake nude Brooke Shields.
Well,
I guess she was
just
age, but
started things. I mean, there's the whole Romeo and Juliet thing with Leonard Whiting and Olivia Hussey, and then there's like the week before that came out, weren't there a whole bunch of interviews with both Christopher Atkins and Brooke Shields sort of going, oh, that movie wouldn't be made anymore.
Neither would Pretty Baby, actually. Or no, Little Darlings or Pretty Baby.
Get all the way through that. I started watching and then went, this is just ick. So, but
so in terms of, because I've watched interviews with Christopher Atkins, and they really tried to market him as the next John Travolta. Same thing with Maxwell Caulfield from Grease too. So I guess you just need one big hit in order to sort of propel you to success. And we know that the 80s is filled with the best campy cult movie musicals of all time. And I think Christopher Atkins is very comparable to Maxwell Caulfield. They both wanted to sort of create the next, maybe John Travolta.
I think they were cute enough to do that, but I don't think they had the charisma of a Travolta, ultimately.
No. But also, Maxwell Caulfield was a legitimate actor that had done Broadway and was married to Nanny from Nanny and the Professor. Like he was a real actor, whereas like wasn't Christopher Atkins spotted as a swimming trainer at some agent's wife? Yeah. It's one of those. He was entirely a look and a body.
Yep, and a charm. He was just charming. He wasn't charming, talented in it.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I remember him from Dallas, he got brought on
Oh,
to
yeah.
be Sue
Mhm.
Ellen's teenage lover, and it was. I mean, he must have been 21 or 22, but he looked about 16, and it was creepy. It was. Yeah. Mhm.
It
They
was
wouldn't make
the
that.
80s.
It was
It
the
was the
80s.
80s.
It was the
Probably not.
80s.
But I know of Gilbert and Sullivan, but so we'll get into the plot before we get into music, but do you think it was a really weird or sort of kick-ass and sort of groundbreaking thing for them to do to try to update Gilbert and Sullivan for like 80s teenagers? Do you think it was kick-ass or do you think it was weird?
I think they were trying to make a buck. I think they
Mhm.
were free music. Don't have to pay anyone for the rights. Um, disco had been huge. There were all those, Ethel Merman does disco, where all these people re-recording their songs with disco backgrounds, and I think it was a bandwagon that was like Grease 2. It was a little bit late. If I think it was 4 years between Grease 1 and Grease 2, and if they'd done it
Mhm.
sort of maybe 2 years earlier, it would have sunk without a trace. But yeah,
Right.
but it's like that moment had passed, and yeah,
Well,
I
it
don't
was such
know.
a strange thing to bring into the 80s. Oh, sorry. But
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. I mean, it was it was sort of like the 80s had all these like weird little trends. So you have this little bump that's Gilbert and Sullivan, you have this little bump that's sushi, you have this little bump that's this. And so there was all these like I mean, then just like a flash. It was like a boom and it's over. So it's like them trying to jump in, capitalize on this one weird little thing. That's why it kind of, I think, missed the mark because, yeah, I'm sure it had success in New York and it was extremely, extremely popular, but I don't think the rest of the country was like ready for I am the very model of a modern major general. I mean, it
Yeah.
is, but I mean, it's a wonderful play, and I'm glad that people got exposed to it. My mom always loved Gilbert and Sullivan, so she was like, "No, watch this. Don't watch this, crappy cartoon. Put the Gilbert and Sullivan on." So,
I mean, for all intents and purposes, the pirate movie sort of follows the plot of
mhm.
the Pirates of Penzance, and it adds, pop culture references. And I think the pop culture references and the dialogue and the really kitschy, campy sort of things they say, and the innuendos, the amount
Oh,
of
yeah.
innuendos in this film, I
Mhm.
love this film, and I'm one of my only friends in my little cult group who loves the pirate movie. They're like, I can't watch this. It's terrible. I like because it's wonderful. And it's just filled with such wonderful dialogue. I think that's what makes it stand out. And it's not taking itself too seriously.
No,
No,
not
but
at
it's
all.
also not making fun of itself. Th- there was a tour here in New Zealand. An Australian company would do Gilbert and Sullivan shows and tour them around New Zealand because you don't have to pay rights. And there was an Australian actor called John English, who you possibly don't know about, but he was the Pirate King and all that sort of stuff. And
Mhm.
they played it like, isn't this a bit shit? This is all a bit stupid, and it was horrible to watch and the bits I've seen of the Xanadu stage show, I don't like it because they're
Nope.
going, this is, what a heap of shit. And it's like, no, it's not a heap of shit. It's Xanadu and it's beautiful and
Mhm.
Helena and I agree with that wholeheartedly. We talked about on the
good.
Xanadu episode. Something shouldn't be mocked in order for it to be fun.
Yeah.
That's why,
No,
yeah.
I mean, the source material is fun, so have fun. I mean, have the fun and to your point, James, you were talking about the pop culture references. I mean, Gilbert and Sullivan allowed for pop culture references in their shows. Wherever it played in a different city or something, they would pop in like little things that were germane to that city. And so
yes.
they were flexible, and I think going forward, they would have been pretty flexible with this too.
Yeah,
Some
and
of it is
I'm glad
a little juvenile, but you know, but
that
I
y'all
think
talked that it's one of those really nice, like Helena and I agree, sometimes nice movies fail. I mean, and that's why Grease 2 came over here for the stage in the UK, but they called it Cool Rider. But even though it had the same music, they sort of made fun of Grease 2. And they tried to adapt Teen Witch in LA, but like some of the roles were played by drag queens and they made fun of Teen Witch. And it's like, and the whole Xanadu thing of why, and it makes it where it's like it's dumbing it down for audiences. I don't like meanness. I don't like meanness when it comes to art. And like the whole Showgirls unauthorized musical makes fun of Elizabeth Berkley and makes fun of Showgirls. And I'm just like, I don't like that.
All women suffered enough, really. I mean, really, yeah.
So let's jump to, I mean, Helena probably knows more about this particular Pirates of Penzance, and I think you're a purist. Are you a pirate purist?
Well, I mean, it's to me, it's like apples and oranges. It's like they're equal to me in my heart. Because I mean, if you look at the straightforward adaptation of it, I mean, Kevin Kline as the Pirate King, holy shit, he's amazing. He's so amazing. And I mean, the guy that plays the Pirate King in the Pirate movie is also amazing in his own way. He's very funny. He's very bravado. I mean, and he's got that jeweled codpiece, which is ridiculous. I was noticing that last time I watched it. I was like, wow, I never noticed that before. But no, I think these are, in my heart, they are equal, 100%.
And maybe it was a really kick-ass thing for them to try to like take, Gilbert and Sullivan. Yeah, I think Michael, I agree with you that it was a cash grab. But maybe it was kind of a cool thing for them to try to sort of market it to a younger audience with a younger generation.
Yeah. Well, I think they knew too that it was. Sorry.
Yeah, good.
Okay. I think it also, you have to think about how cheap this was to make. I mean, there's hardly anything in this movie set wise. I mean, half of it is outside and half of it is just in this house, and like a quarter of it is in the ship. So it's like this movie probably cost pennies to make. So of course it's like you say, rights are free, the sets are nothing, and you just clothe actors and you put them there. So
I think too, there was a Gilbert and Sullivan. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, and up until about, well, no, I think there's still one in Wellington now. There's a Gilbert and Sullivan Society that does Gilbert and Sullivan shows, and I think there's still a big deal. Do you remember a film called Chariots of Fire? Do you know that film? And there's a scene where they're all sort of signing up for the different societies to belong to, and there's a Gilbert and Sullivan Society there that which would have been, I don't know when the movie was set, was that like 10 or 15 years after Gilbert and Sullivan's? I guess it would be like people now going, oh, let's have an Andrew Lloyd Webber club and
yeah. Well, and too, there's also the light opera societies. So light opera is always a huge thing, and Gilbert and Sullivan is like the perfect light opera material to play.
Apparently, and I don't know what this would be for adjusted for inflation. I don't know if this is necessarily true or if it was bullshit on terms of the producers, but apparently this had a $9 million budget in 19.
That's nothing. Yeah, that's this much. Yeah.
I wonder if that would be in the 80s, like in terms of half of that probably went to Christy McNichol and Chris Pratt.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. Yeah, well, that's what I say. They could get they could secure. I'm doing a little conversion here. Let's see. 1980 money. Was that 9 million Australian or 9 million US?
US.
Okay. Let's see. 9 million.
And then we've never done this before. We'll get into the nitty gritty of everything in a minute.
Sorry.
But yeah, that
okay, that would be 32,549,000.
Wow.
32,550.
It's still quite low, isn't it? Though, I mean,
I guess so. Yeah.
I'm
going to also look at how much a movie costs to make.
And it's beautiful in terms of things. And Michael, I know you're in New Zealand, but I mean, do you think they chose Australia because of how gorgeous it is, and they could basically shoot it when it was cold in America? Or was there sort of like that and the combination of it being cheaper to film there? I mean, I think there's so many things that probably went into that.
So the guy that's the Pirate King was also one of the producers, and he is an Australian that he was in a TV series called Cop Shop, or I think we didn't get that here either. But he was a known TV person, but probably a little bit not washed up. But he wasn't currently on TV But so he was a known thing, and I very much guessing that the Australian film industry went, look, we could make some money, we could get ourselves noticed internationally, just get a couple of hot teen stars and put them into this property. And yeah.
So, okay, so yeah, the budget for movies nowadays, so you say 32,500 for pirate movie, low end of making a mainstream movie these days is 50 million. So it was cost effective, I think you could say.
Well, and the Australians wouldn't have been paid much to be in it.
Yeah, I'm sure the exchange rate worked in our favor.
Yeah.
So what makes this, of course, so special in terms of a movie, every cult movie musical, the reason they've lasted and they've built a cult, not because of just the campiness, because of the music. Now, there's a weird juxtaposition between the Gilbert and Sullivan. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of years old that music would have been in 1982.
Not very much. It would have been about 100.
Oh, 100?
Yeah, 1880s.
Yeah, and you have that, and on the flip side, you've got these 80s bangers that were written, and there's such a weird, they would go from singing, We Are the Pirates, and then I Am the Pirate King, then you would break into, First Love. I mean, the music, I love the weird sort of cutting in, cutting out of Gilbert and Sullivan, and then an 80s banger. Gilbert and Sullivan, and then an Angie. I think it works. What do you all think about that?
Oh yeah, it's a loving homage. I mean, that's why it works, is you could tell they had a lot of fun doing it. They had a lot of fun writing it. They had a lot of fun performing it. I mean, that's why the songs just, I think, slide right into the overall production.
I prefer the 80s stuff, really. I like Pirates of Penzance in the Rex Smith, Linda Ronstadt version, but yeah, I'm with Christy McNichol when she goes, can you believe this number or something, when the sisters are singing? It's like,
well, and that's the way you go back to the original play of that. That's supposed to be extreme. You're supposed to say, can you believe this? Like we are ladies and we're climbing over rocky mountains, and the whole part of that, when they get to the little pond on the beach, and they're like, we're going to take our shoes and our stockings off and paddle, and that's like, oh. Yeah, and I mean, the Victorians knew that was completely ridiculous in every possible way. So they're in on the joke, and that joke continues perfectly in the pirate movie.
And a couple of the Gilbert and Sullivan songs, they sort of tweak it to be humorous. For I Am the Very Model of a
Modern Major General.
He says, I'm younger than the Beatles, older than the Beatles, younger than the Rolling Stones. And I'm just like...
Well, it's like, if you think about it too, it's like, if you go back in time to the original lyrics of that, I mean, it's kind of like, if you remember Deadwood and how they would insert the phrase cocksucker and everything, they did that because they wanted to have the effect of shocking the modern viewers, but in reality, what they were probably saying was like, damn. But that was the equivalent of that, so it's like they're trying to do an equivalency. But if you think about it in terms of the Gilbert and Sullivan, what they were doing in the 1880s is the same exact joke as what they're doing with Younger Than the Beatles but Older Than the Rolling Stones. If you weight it,
Yeah.
I think it was a brilliant idea to sort of put those 80s songs in. And doing research, a lot of the songs by... so let's focus on, I guess, just the 80s, and then we can go back to Pirate Penzance. We have First Love. We've got Hold On, How Can I Live Without Her, Happy Ending. Those songs were written by Trevor Brenton, who wrote a lot of Tina Turner's biggest hits. What's Love Got to Do with It? Typical Male. We Don't Need Another Hero. I mean, legitimately, and he's a really accomplished songwriter, and I'm like, wow, like, it blew my socks off.
Yeah, that's why Christy and Christopher's song, I mean, not only First Love, but her solo and his solo was hits. They were all hits over here.
Okay, I know How Can I Live Without You was released as a
Mhm.
single here, but it didn't do
Didn't do
anything.
much.
It did like 71 on the Billboard 100, which is actually, when you think about it, I mean, for somebody that's not a singer, we'll get into that. That's actually pretty cool. And I think the soundtrack was really popular in Australia. It hit like
Of
34.
course.
But even though Krista, and we'll get into the whole music thing, but looking at those songs, they work. I think
Yeah,
they're beautifully composed.
Hmm. And they're fun.
yeah. And the harmonies, the backing vocals, the whole, it is beautiful. Yeah.
Now, what really surprised me the first, because I knew of Chrissy McNichol from Empty Nest. I don't know if you ever saw Empty Nest.
Oh, yes. Yes.
It used to come on after the Golden Girls because it was a Golden Girls spinoff. So I knew about her, and I knew that the night the lights went out in Georgia, of course, because I'm from Georgia. But so when I first went into watching the pirate movie, I was like, damn, she sings beautiful.
Hmm.
I know she sang in the night, and she sang in another movie. I don't remember what it's called. It's something about only. It's really weird. It's like only. I think I looked it up. Only When I Laugh, she sings, and it's like a weird take made for TV movie. But I mean, we'll get to Christopher Atkins' singing voice in a minute. But I mean, Chrissy McNichol like could have really been like on the charts as either country or pop. I mean, it's really unusual how she didn't take her music career further after this.
Didn't she have a breakdown or something fairly
Yeah, I was
soon
gonna
after?
say she had been a child star, and I think she had gone through kind of the rough, the mill in Hollywood, and so that's why I think by the time you get to the pirate movie, she's kind of coming to like, I don't know that I want to do this much longer, and then eventually she retired completely, and I forget what she was doing nowadays, but she's got a totally normal life somewhere.
She was
She
a
did.
hairdresser for a while.
I was gonna say hairdresser or something like that.
Yeah, but I think
Go ahead.
I think she's teaching drama or
Mm.
something at somewhere. I'm reading MDiv or something. But one of those, those conventions where everyone comes and signs photos. I've seen that she is doing one of those or has done one just recently. So maybe she
Well, and
just
also she came out of the closet. She
yeah,
was a lesbian as well. So I mean, I can't imagine Hollywood, was probably pretty much of a grind with that at that time period.
right, yeah.
Because she did Empty Nest 87, 88, and Empty Nest was a huge hit. And she
Mhm.
left it during its big popularity because she's like, she went through depression. She's like, I got to get out of the entertainment industry.
I think that was the second time. There's a film. What's the film? There's something to do with skiing, and I think Michael Ontkean or whatever is. There was a film that she was making, and they were like 3 weeks from ending, and she had some sort of incident.
Okay.
And then the whole film shut down for a year, and then
wow.
she came back, and she was a completely different physicality because of I can't remember. I'm sure if you look her up on the Internet Movie Database, it'll be.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I don't know about that one. But yeah, I mean, that seems like that would seem to fit with kind of the way she ended her career and, the
Yeah.
times and things and being a child star. I can't imagine being a child star in that time. It would have been awful. I mean, Drew Barrymore, look at what happened to her. She's drinking alcohol on the set of E.T. and all this kind of stuff. It's crazy.
But good
No,
on Christy.
What's that, James?
yeah,
Good on Christy for getting out of, or Christy McNichol for getting out of
Yeah.
Hollywood. And she was really smart. If you watch Empty Nest and you watch this movie, she's got a very deadpan sort of delivery. I think she's a great actress.
I think she's oh, she was. I'm sure she was winning Emmys for Family. You should watch. Family was just a normal family with a mum and a dad and a divorced older sister and a brother, and she was the younger daughter. White people's problems, but it was, yeah. But it was. Well, I think I was 13 or 14 when it was on TV, and in the first episode, she stole her parents' car and drove And she was like, there's a 13-year-old, and we all at school the next day was like, did you see that 13-year-old girl driving the car, and amazing, and so it was compulsory watching. And then Little Darlings was astounding, all that virginity and yeah, shocking.
But then Christopher Atkins, of course, his voice was blended with the screenwriter Trevor Ferrant. So of course you can hear that it's both him and Trevor Ferrant, their voices blended together, sort of like, kind of like in Mame with Lucy. Lucy is her voice is blended with her voice. I love Mame. We'll get to that later.
I do too.
But Christopher Atkins, I mean, for all intents and purposes, he sings nice. I wish we could have actually heard him sing versus his voice being blended with someone else. What do you?
I'd like to hear. I can't isolate which is him and which is the other guy. I always thought it was him. Like when it came out, I had no bother. It's it would be interesting to hear what he can do. Lots of people just have lovely voices without any training whatsoever.
But apparently he and Kristy McNichol were offered record contracts after this film came out, which is kind of interesting. It's sort of like the Milli Vanilli effect, which actually both of them can actually really sing. It's a different thing. Very well. But it was kind of like, I don't know, you guys were like children of the 80s. I love it. So Michelle Pfeiffer was offered a record contract right after Grease 2. Now, in the 80s, was it basically that if you were like a teen star, you were expected to also sing as well? Was that something that was expected of people?
Wasn't that in the 60s as well? I've got a Sally Field album, The Flying Nun Sings.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think pretty much, Shelley Fabre's Johnny Angel, do you know that song?
Yep.
She was on some TV, I can't remember what show she was on, but she had to record an album, and her backing singers were like, "Oh, we're doing Frank Sinatra next week," and all these, and there was this 17-year-old girl that couldn't really sing a note.
Right. Well, and also you think like totally, and they did that all. I mean, that was just the trend of the time. If you think like France Gall, the only reason that France Gall in actual France, she was a singer because she was the daughter of the record executive. She was a teenager. She couldn't sing for crap, but everyone around her, I mean, Serge Gainsbourg and stuff was writing songs for her. So it's like you have so much talent underneath of her, kind of pushing her up. That's kind of the what they did with a lot of people that were cute at the time. Although, I mean, nowadays, everyone who's a singer or mainstream has to be visually appealing. Back then, it's like you didn't have to be. But if you were visually appealing, they were like, oh my God, you can do this. You're cute and you can be in a movie and you can also sing.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's exploit everything about this human being, which is probably why Kristy McNichol was like, I'm done.
I know there are other singers in the film, and I know there's other cast, but those two drive the film. This film is them. And it would have been interesting to see Kristy McNichol sing. And I love Christopher Atkins. I think he's a cutie. But I would have been interested to hear him sing and what that could have done in terms of him having a music career. Now, I don't know if you guys remember. So did you see it when it came out, or did you catch it later? Because I know it became popular on HBO during the summer of like.
Definitely HBO for me. And then VHS. Yeah.
I saw it at the movies. Yeah, on a big screen. Yeah. With not very many people in the audience.
But this is something that sort of like makes me scratch my head, because I'm really curious for you guys' opinion. So you have these two massive, I mean, they were massive stars at the time and around the world.
They were massive. They weren't like massive. They were massive.
They were massive for young, like they weren't a De Niro or they weren't
Yeah.
They made kids movies or teenage movies. They didn't make serious films.
Yeah.
So I think it was a summer blockbuster type thing. Or did we have summer block? Oh, yeah, no, we'd already had Jaws and Star Wars. So, yeah.
So,
but
why do you, if there were teeny boppers, or, if they were trying to be like, if they were sort of popular with a certain demographic, why do you think the movie came and went without any fanfare?
I think it was probably more for teenage girls than teenage boys, really. And I think, don't they make movies these days for sort of 18-year-old boys? Isn't that sort of the demographic that they pitch it?
Guns and shooting and not a lot of singing. No,
not a lot of. Well, that's it. At that time, if you confessed to liking a musical, then your sexuality was suspect, and possibly still is now. So
I would throw in. Yeah, I would throw in, I don't know, I think more like marketing issue probably with this one, because it was kind of self-produced in Australia. It wasn't, I don't know that a major studio went to Australia. I think the producer really pushed this one to kind of get made. So I don't think, especially trying to launch a movie like that with that kind of background in the States, I just don't, that's not going to get a huge push. It was kind of like, let's throw this out and see if it works. I don't even know how many screens it opened on. I can't imagine that it had the same kind of release that other kind of teenage movies at the time would have had. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. It wasn't in the same class as Annie. Annie was released about the same time.
Which that had toys, that had a release, that had a lot of push. And it had, huge stars in it too, so.
Yeah, and I was talking to John on the Voyage of the Rock Aliens episode that's not aired yet. In terms of successful musicals of the 80s, really the only one we've talked about that's actually was successful was The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And believe it or not, that's the most profitable movie musical of the 80s in terms of box office returns. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I believe it.
A massive hit.
Well, didn't it have Academy Award nods and stuff like that? So you got that crowd, you got the musical crowd, you got the Dolly Parton crowd, you got the Burt Reynolds crowd, and you had kind of compounding things that would want to make you go see this.
But the 80s had such great, catchy, sort of campy musicals: Xanadu, Grease 2, The Apple, Pirate Movie, and the Earth Girls Are Easy, Voyage of the Rock Aliens, Teen Witch, and they all flopped. Is it because the 80s was like a time where musicals just weren't hip or in anymore or something?
I think they were too silly. I think they're perceived as too silly for that.
Yes.
It's like, this is just fluff, Some people like fluff. I like fluff.
Yeah, I think Grease came out of nowhere, as a hit. I don't think people were expecting it to be a hit. And then it was like, oh, people like musicals again. Let's make musicals, but I don't think they altogether do.
And doing a lot of saying musicals.
Yeah, have you seen Matilda? That's just come out.
I don't kind of want to.
Oh, it's it started. It actually, I think it's great. But when it started, the first 3 or 4 minutes, I was sitting there going, this is why people don't like musicals, because it's zany and cute and all that sort of stuff. And then when they get into the actual story, it's fantastic. And there's an incredible song that is basically teaches you the alphabet. And it look up the alphabet. I don't know what it's like the school song from Matilda. And from then on, I was just glued. So, yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Now,
I'll take that.
Did the pirate movie come out before or after or during the same sort of spark of the MTV sort of beginning or generation?
Concurrent. Yeah, concurrent. That probably had a good effect too, is that, MTV is cool. This is not cutting edge. This is not new wave. This is not electronic. This is not what we're doing right now.
But I think maybe if they would have marketed it on MTV, You think it could have
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think totally.
those?
I think it was
I think
too organic for MTV. I don't think wasn't plastic enough for MTV, I guess.
I was about to say, isn't it that it's more, adults creating marketable product, so it's not authentic enough or something for
I would
MTV?
say that. I mean, if you think of the original MTV videos and all the stuff that played on MTV, it was not made by corporate anybody. It was all came out of nowhere and was made kind of cutting edge and avant-garde and all that kind of stuff. And obviously the pirate movie, is something that's professionally done and professionally released. So it just doesn't have that same kind of cool rawness that an MTV would want to do. It's a difference between Adamant as a pirate and this. That's how I would phrase it.
So the way that they marketed this movie and Grease 2, they had Grease 2 perform on Top of the Pops or Solid Gold. They had them
Right.
Birds perform Prowlin', and I don't know if it was in the States or if it was Australia, but they had Christopher Atkins sing "How Do I Live."
You sent me that clip. Oh my God.
Oh, where were his minders? Who allowed
Homeboy
him
can't
to be
dance.
seen doing that?
And
Yes.
attempting to dance. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I mean, you guys didn't like it?
It was no, I loved it. I loved it. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Yes. Oh, I remember a making of. There was a making of or a premiere. I know there was a Grease premiere program that we got here in New Zealand, but there was a making of the pirate movie that I used to have on video, but it went white and fell
Yeah,
apart.
like I've
But,
seen that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's the stunt work being done with where they're fighting on the rooftop and you can actually see the rope and them hanging from the rope and them saying that Christopher Atkins was as good a stunt person as the stunt person. So there was publicity about it, but I don't know. I mean, New Zealand and Australia have a we're in the same kind of location, and there's a rivalry, and then there's also we kind of do like the same stuff as well. So
Oh yeah.
Well,
I mean,
it's
you're
easy to-
piratey. You're very piratey places, I would say.
That's right. Yes.
Well, I don't know. You can't cry over spilt milk, and it's impossible to sort of get in the minds of producers. But if they were smart, I mean, if you see the girls and the hormones when they're watching Christopher Atkins sing, quote unquote, I mean, if they were really smart, they would have marketed this as like on. And I don't know. I just don't understand. I guess because I love campy, cheesy movies. I don't understand why it wasn't a bigger hit if they had Chrissy McNichol and Christopher Atkins. I don't understand why it didn't sort of catch on.
What was in the same year? Is that Firefox? And I'm just trying to think what other films we were seeing. Was Shock Treatment year as
Indiana
well?
Jones, I think, would have come out that year. It was released in 81, right?
It was E.T. 1982 was E.T. So that's what we always do. Yeah.
I think Shock was 81, which Shock Treatment, I prefer Shock Treatment to Rocky Horror, and I know I get a lot of.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Shock Treatment is so much better than Rocky Horror. The music's so much better, and it's reality, literally.
Yes.
And that's another movie that flopped. It was ahead of its time. But thinking about like what happened after the pirate movie, I just know as sort of like, a youngin' looking back and seeing how their careers were. But in terms of Christy McNichol and Christopher Atkins, once this movie released, we know Christy McNichol, of course, went on to do Empty Nest, but that was quite a few years later. Mm-hmm. What sort of became of them? So this came and went. Did their team sort of icon status remain after this, or did it dwindle like it always does with everyone?
No, they definitely weren't flavor of the month anymore. I think by this time they had started to fade as they were making this movie, and then after that it was kind of like a. So I just don't. I mean, I think they were sort of like young actors after that. It wasn't like teeny bopper heartthrob kind of thing.
And I think they, a newer model will have come along as well to upstage them, and yeah, and he didn't really have chops like if we're being brutal, he probably didn't really have the chops to continue his career as a sorry.
Yeah.
But
Well,
she did, but she chose not to.
he was in the
Oh,
bad movie we're talking about. What is it called? One Night in Heaven? Or
Yes, he was.
yes.
but even with that, I mean, even after that, he was still given a lot of opportunities. As I'm sure that you know, he was supposed to be in Footloose.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
And
I didn't know that.
I watched, but it was a recent interview, probably about 10 years ago, recent. And he talked about that he got sort of a big head after, this particular film, and he got sort of a big head after Blue Lagoon. I mean, if people tell you how fabulous and wonderful you are, you start to believe it. And he showed up to the audition. I think he had been partying all night before, and he blew it.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of sad because it makes you wonder what if. I think he had, I don't know, his acting's a bit wooden in this, but he's so gorgeous, I forget.
Well, you could tell he's having fun. I mean, I think it's more I'm just fucking around and having fun than it is I'm actually trying to emote and act. It's like I think he kind of treats Christy McNichol in this movie like she's kind of his kid sister more than his love interest, I think. So you can tell that they're just taking the piss and they're having fun. I was also going to say I'm looking at other movies that came out in 1982, and there's a lot of kind of one-hit wonders in that year. I mean, Poltergeist was big, but you know what is occurring to me as I'm looking at this is that I think that was also the time when VHS and VCRs were overtaking. I mean, there was a huge dip in the film industry right around that time. So it's like more people weren't going to the movies because they had the movies at home. And, the VCRs were getting cheaper and rental places were getting more plentiful. So a lot of people were not going. So that's also probably another big thing at this time.
I mean, at least we look back on these music, like even Labyrinth flopped
Mhm.
really bad, and we know how big Labyrinth is now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the 80s is like the quintessential decade for cult movie musicals. I mean, started with Shock Treatment, or the Apple was before Shock Treatment, and it carried on. In terms of the whole cult legacy of this film, other movie musicals like Rocky Horror, Phantom of Paradise, Shock Treatment, so on and so forth, they've resurrected and they have shadow cast now. Even Xanadu had a second life. There are movies like, Grease 2 is getting a second life where they do screenings and Q&As, etc. But Voyage of the Rock Aliens and the pirate movie, they're loved in terms of campy and kitschy, sort of just over the top cult movie musicals. Why do you think that this particular cult movie musical hasn't sort of reached the heights of, say, like another 80s cult movie musical like Grease 2 or Teen Witch?
I think mostly because it doesn't, if you think about the other movies that are popular, they have either like they're really weird or they have like a horror tie-in, horror sci-fi tie-in. So I think it's kind of like this is before, Pirates of the Caribbean and all that kind of stuff, Johnny Depp. And pirates were sort of like, back then. And a lot of the pirate movies, the other pirate movies that came out were kind of like people just were like, okay, what do I do with this? I'll play with it for a minute and then I'm just like, all right, whatever. So, yeah.
I wonder too if it's because it's an Australian film with and I think the Australian industry is probably a little embarrassed by it because it is a cashing in on American stars, so that's like not telling Australian stories. So I doubt they would be pushing it from there. And then, yeah. How did you see it first? Did someone?
Me?
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
I always loved weird cult movie musicals. Like I never gravitated towards Annie. I never Yentl, any of those like serious West Side Story.
Annie.
Oh, get out of here! Yeah, and West Side Story. Oh my God!
Musical.
It's the post.
I know. I tried. I always liked the weird, the macabre, and the ridiculous.
Same.
So me, it started with Rocky Horror, and then of course it was Shock Treatment, Best Little Horror House. Well, I'm obsessed with Dolly Parton, but Rockula, Xanadu, Pirate Movie, and so I saw Pirate Movie because it was on a list of movies that I created on Microsoft Word. This is before we had the internet, and I went to a used DVD store and found it and watched it in Tybee Island, Georgia. And I was like, I love this. I love this so much. And it was really hard for me to find the soundtrack. And so I got a bootleg CD that was ripped from the vinyl. And it's still not available on CD, and it's still not available on streaming.
No, I found it on some dodgy website and downloaded it. And I'm pretty sure there's a warp in one of the tracks that you never play, one of those like Kool and the Gang or whatever. Yeah, but there's a sort of a through the recording.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
But some ripped it and remastered it from the LP. I don't know how they did it, and put it on YouTube. So that's how I listen to it now. And I have the bootleg CD. But I wish, like I told John, I wish that this could be like on a triple feature of like Grease 2, Pirate Movie, Voyage of the Rock Aliens. Because they're so endearing, and I think they're of the same spirit. And maybe throw in Earth Girls Are Easy for good measure. But
what about Captain Invincible? That's the what's because that's Aussie as well, isn't it? That's really weird. What is it? The Return of Captain.
Yes.
I'm gonna write that one down. I haven't heard of that one.
I've reviewed it on my blog, and it's got music from Richard O'Brien and Richard Hartley, who wrote the music for Rocky Horror Picture Show Treatment.
Yes.
It's like some weird sort of like middle-aged superhero.
Alan Arkin is a retired superhero, and Christopher Lee singing.
Ooh, okay.
And, yeah.
I'm in.
You're in.
Yeah.
Really bad music too, but some of it very
80s, like very 1980, whatever year it was. It was like that's what the music was that year, and never before and never again. Yeah.
I love those kind of movies like that. Like Back to the Beach, if you think of the movie Back to the Beach, if you've seen that one, like that is like if you took 1987 and put it in a compactor and compacted it flat, that is exactly what living in that year felt like. Yes. And I love it. Yeah. I get the same feeling with Rockula, but like 1989. So for what that's worth.
I'm so glad you brought that up, the whole Back to the Beach. My favorite line in the whole film, I get a kick out of it all the time, and I'll say it to myself sometimes. He's like, it's a beach party, and I'm Frank Avalon, and I'm Annette Funicello.
And I'm Annette Funicello.
I love it. I love how stupid it is. Like, it's so endearing.
The dinner and the accident story is something that my friends and I still do. Oh, dinner and the accident story. Anyway, have you seen it?
Yeah. Years and years and years ago. But,
you should go see it again. It's really good. Yeah.
Michael, before we segue out, have you ever seen the weird cult movie musical that's Australian, 20th Century Oz?
I had it on DVD and I watched it once and went, yeah, I don't need to see that again.
Dorothy with the wizard in a shower.
Yeah.
It's wonderful, though. So the legacy of this film is I'm hoping that blogs like this and you guys talking about it is that people were like, you know what? So people always message me like, what other movies do you recommend besides the ones that you reviewed? I was like, start with Rocky Horror, or actually start with Phantom of the Paradise, because Phantom of the Paradise became before Rocky Horror.
Mm-hmm.
Phantom of the Paradise, for all intents and purposes, it was the first cult movie musical. It was doing its thing with the cult callbacks and all of that before Rocky Horror.
Right.
Phantom Palooza.
It's music. Shock horror. Yes.
Well, I love Rocky Horror, but Phantom of the Paradise has better music thanks to Jessica Harper. But there was an article, I don't know if it was Vice or it was some Queerty or something, Wussy Mag, I'm not quite sure. A few years ago I read it and it just warmed my heart and it made me giggle. And it was like, in defense of Pirate Movie. I can't find that article. And it's like, it's terrible. It's atrocious, but sometimes I just want to scream out, "Give me a happy ending." I
Mm.
love it.
Yes.
That's what I love about the pirate movie. It's that they're all about to kill each other. They're all about to kick each other's ass. And then Mabel is like, wait, this is not how I want my story to end. And they do it's got horrible lyrics, but it's a beautiful song. Happy
Oh.
ending. I think.
I was going to
Paul
say,
and choreography. There's that moment where they do a big fat close up on
Mhm.
the Pirate King and Mabel, and they're out with their kicks, and it's like that's the cut, that's the take you used.
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
it's a shock.
I was gonna say, so that song, and Michael, you might know about this because, I mean, I took one course of music theory, and that's all I had, so I don't have much. But that song, when I was a 5-year-old, it always used to make me really sad. And I know there's like certain chords that you can do at the end,
Yes.
Get
where it's
my
like
phone.
it's a sad chord, and every time I would hear it at the end, I'd be like, "Aw." I mean, they're having their happy ending, but I'd be like, "Aw."
I was going to ask you.
That's a
Yeah, little heartstrings are tugging. Yeah.
yeah. We do go to the minor. Then we get to this one. It's thrilling. It's really a thrilling piece of music.
Don't stop. Keep playing it. You're done with
You're gonna make him cry.
Oh, now look, you see this beautiful book. For some reason, in the 80s, all my sheet music was bound the way they bound it. If you open it in a way that you can actually use it, the pages fall. So I've never actually, like I sit with it on my lap. So
It's almost like you'd have to get it like 3-hole punched and then be able to open it up. Never, no. Nope. Forget I said that. Get a second copy. It can fall apart, and you can 3-hole punch it. Oh, there they are.
I think this is the only copy in Wellington. Like I remember walking into the shop, and it was already a little bit tatty.
So you bought it at the time.
Going, I will have that. And they didn't have any others. So yeah, I think I have the one. And I don't think I've seen it on eBay either. I know I looked for Puffin Stuff for years, and that was coming, on eBay for like $300 American for the Puffin Stuff songbook, and it was like, I can't justify that. But yeah, so look, photos.
Oh, look at that! Look at them, so cute.
If you could just play the chorus for me, I would be the happiest person in the world.
Absolutely. Here we go. You want the chorus? I'll just give you the. Funny chords at the end. That's not what it does on the record.
Well done. Well done. Yay.
Thank you. I was just going to do a little name dropping. So I actually worked. I was the assistant musical director of a production of Mamma Mia in Melbourne. It was. And so, there's the three main women. So the woman that played the Christine Baranski part in the film is an Australian icon called Rhonda Birchmore. And Rhonda is the sister with the very high cut, the swimsuit.
The long butt.
So
yeah, okay.
I worked with her for a few months. Yeah. So I knew her. And I did say to her once, oh my God, I love the pirate movie. And she shut me down pretty smartly. because
I wasn't
was
expecting that to go there. You know how long I have been trying to find the LP? Because I finally got a record player because it's like hip now for my generation to have record players. How did you obtain the LP?
All right, I
was
can't
just
get
in the
it to
shop.
do right. I
It
can't.
was just
I
in
can't
the shop. I think mine was even secondhand. I bought it in a secondhand record shop.
Oh, nope. Sorry, hang on. Sorry about that. I'm so used to using Teams for work, but anyway, you can see part of it here. It's not blacking
Yeah.
out. So there you go. LP. They still exist. They're around.
Yeah.
The only thing, so I was trying to find, I've got the Betamax of it, I've got the VHS of it. I have a German Blu-ray of it, I think, that I have not been able, so I've got to find a way to transfer that. I think I can find a way. But it did not, this is another sign of how little push it had behind it is it did not get a Laserdisc. And that was the time when if your movie came out and it was a decently profitable movie, they would do a Laserdisc. So just throwing that out there.
I had two different DVD editions, and one of them had the director's commentary. One of them didn't have a director's commentary.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember when director's commentaries were first happening and people were writing reviews on them, that the pirate movie got one of the worst reviews for the director's commentary because apparently he was so old and he kept sort of going, oh, but I also made Those Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines, or I also made... I mean,
I love that movie too. I didn't know he made that one. I love that movie. So
I think that's him. He made one of those. No, I think that is him. Ken Anakin. I think he had made in the 60s. He had made, movies that made money.
Sure.
I don't think he was necessarily the first choice for the pirate movie. Is that right? I can't remember.
I don't know. I'd have to look at the IMDb again. But yeah, that's it. Magnificent Men is fun.
I don't know. Movie, obviously, I got a little choked up. Helena, I'm pretending she got choked up because I mean that song's beautiful. That movie's so beautiful, and I wish it had more love in terms of my generation, in other subsequent generations. Could you imagine young people trying to sing on TikTok, the songs on TikTok or something? I mean, that's
First Love is beautiful. I've always wanted to sing. Well, we did used to sing. So I made my kids watch this film. So they're now 30 and 27. But when they were little, we would sing, and we would sing First Love, and we could harmonize, and it was gorgeous. They'd be mortified now. My son, for his graduating to get his pass for one of his classes, I accompanied him, and he sang... what's it called? Phantom of the Paradise. Beauty and the Beast, A Tale of Beauty and the Beast. Yeah. So I have a recording of my son at 17 singing Beauty and the Beast.
We must imprint these children. That's what we must do.
Absolutely. Well, my son, his name's Barnaby. He has found online somewhere Phantom of the Paradise. There was that whole business with the Death Records and the company saying you can't use our logo and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. So there are cuts that mean nothing.
That's on the Blu-ray that came out over here. Yeah, it's on the US Blu-ray. Yeah, they have the alternate cut of that with the no blocking the logo.
Smooth and yeah, because he's found it on YouTube and downloaded it here somewhere. That's good. I'm glad it's out there and people see what.
No, totally. Well, that's why, I mean, the pirate movie deserves like a Vinegar Syndrome or one of those kind of releases where it's like it has the old commentary track and it has like Christopher Atkins talking about it and stuff like that. So someday, I mean, they still haven't released Shout Factory would be a perfect. I mean, Shout Factory as a label would be a perfect DVD fit for this kind of thing. Although I'm going to say it, they have not yet done shock treatment in the US on a Blu-ray, which makes me very angry because it was in Europe. It was in England.
In England, there's a Blu-ray of Shock Treatment, but it was going to be like $140 or something. And it's like, again, I've got it on. Yeah.
No, it's on Amazon UK. It's very cheap because they republished it many, many, many times. And I think it's Arrow Video over here.
Yeah, Arrow did it, yeah.
But I think, unfortunately, Helena, it's because Disney now owns Shock Treatment. And they now own Rocky Horror. So we'll never
That's right. Frankenfurter is now a Disney princess. Yes.
A Disney queen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I don't know, but Arrow Video did Shot Factory did Rockula Blu-ray, and they had
Yes,
Dean
which I
Cameron
have.
talk. So I mean, I don't know why Shock Treatment, but I think it's because of Disney. Disney has got their claws into
Right.
20.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I have my ways over here of making things work. So
Wait, 20th Century Fox
They
did,
own Pirate Movie. That's
Well-
Pirate Movie.
didn't they?
Yeah,
Pirate
that's
Movie?
20th Century Fox. Yeah.
but it never came out over here on a disc. It only is in Europe on a disc.
20th Century Fox. Sorry, I'm just trying to.
But now, doesn't Disney own them? Disney owns everybody. I don't even know anymore.
But how I got the DVD, it was Anchor Bay, which then became Lionsgate in the United States.
Mhm.
They released the DVD of Pirate Movie, but now since 20th Century Fox technically is owned by Disney, maybe that's another reason. I don't know. It deserves more love, and it deserves more recognition, and it deserves a Blu-ray. But I guess this is where I'll end. Physical media. Do you think physical media is ending as well, where people are streaming? And Pirate Movie's not even streamed anywhere. It's on YouTube for free.
Well, that's why physical media isn't going anywhere, is because there's always going to be these films that don't, no one wants to see them on streaming. Only a niche amount of people want to see it. So there's always going to be some kind of physical copy. If it's like even if it's a file you have to download and keep, there's always going to be something like that. I mean, like the site that I just sent Michael earlier today that has moment by moment on it. It's like it's going to have to exist somewhere, because nobody in their right mind in a wider audience in the US is ever going to watch that.
No. I think I have a lot of DVDs. I have over 6,000 DVDs, and because they're cheaper than a cup of coffee these days. So
Well, if it's a movie that you love, like you're there at like 12:01 in the morning when that sale goes live, I'm like mashing the button, like, no, I want Shock Treatment, I want Phantom of Paradise,
Yes.
like now, yeah.
Yes.
That's with me.
And I want
great.
the toys. There's a Phantom of the Paradise action figure I've seen online, and I want it, but again, it's by the time they get to yeah.
I want the helmet, and there's a guy that makes the helmet, so I'll send you a link to that guy too. Yeah, and a good friend of mine is processing the lead actor's estate right now too. So hopefully some interesting things will come out of that.
Ooh.
But Pirate Movie and Shock Treatment are on their entirety on YouTube for free. They've been on there for years. They're in HD. Disney, which is now blah 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 20th Century Fox, Disney has not bothered to take them down. I really just don't think they give a shit.
Probably not. Can they make money out of it? That's the thing that we have to keep. It's show business, and it's a business, and they were trying to make money. And the fact that we can love it is for its artistic merits. I think that was probably the least of their concern while they were making it. Yeah.
So you two think somebody is sitting at Disney going, Shock Treatment and Pirate Movie, that needs to be on Blu-ray.
I certainly hope someone is. I mean, that would be nice, but I'm just hoping someone at Shout Factory is having that thought, because maybe that could still work out.
Do y'all have any other closing thoughts about this? I mean, this has been one of the best episodes, because I love this movie. And
well, Michael playing the piano to it is amazing. That's amazing.
Oh,
do y'all have anything else? I know it's cheesy, but I think it's a great film. I mean, I just think it's so good. Do y'all have anything else, to say about this gem, about what it means to y'all, or what you hope people get from it?
I just think it's a feel-good movie. I think it's one of those silly feel-good movies you put in your collection and you put it on when you're having a bad day and it makes you happy.
And it's romantic, and it's lovely to listen to, and the soundtrack is fantastic for long car trips. It is a fantastic soundtrack.
And
until they
Pumpin' and
get
Blowin'.
full in the game.
Pumpin' and Blowin'. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that song is rock.
I recorded it earlier and sent it.
Nice.
Yeah,
I'll have to go back and look.
Again, there are flaws. Those cartoons in Pumping and Blowing. They're just ugly. They're ugly.
They're awful. And then they turned into the
Whereas
Rolling
the one
Stones
in
lips. It's like,
Xanadu
what?
is- What is that? But the cartoon
What?
in Xanadu is beautiful. Is absolutely
That was Don.
Like,
Yeah, Don
absolutely.
Bluth.
Hasn't it been lifted like frame by frame and put in another film like Thumbelina or something? I think
Well,
there's
they
some.
do that. That's something that they actually do in a lot of animated movies. I mean, Disney does this a ton, where it's like there's these sort of motions, and they copy the
Yeah.
motions. So they probably took that and used it for something else.
And you probably have seen the same doco about Xanadu that it's Kenny Ortega did the dance.
Oh yeah, it's totally not the actor. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally
and you
different.
can tell Kenny Ortega, he's the cartooned his nose, Michael Biggs. Yeah.
For me, this movie is perfect summer viewing. I always try to come back around to the pirate movie during the summer. And
Mhm.
because it's a perfect sort of like slumber party summer movie. I just love it. And I think it's so endearing. And I think once people watch it, they're like, it's a kick out, like pumping and blowing. Like, again, this movie is just so ridiculous that you have to love it.
You have to love. I love my favorite line in the whole film is Christy McNichol saying, "Have you ever tried running around in a suit of armor? It's a bitch." And it's like I think that's probably the first time I had heard it's a bitch. You know, using bitch was a naughty word that you didn't say.
Oh, very much. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas to use it in that context, that's the one that floors me. And the little outtake at the end where she talks to the camera is
Hold my
it's
gum.
just-
Yeah. It's so cute.
She's a real person, and yeah.
Well, I told you my thing was I'm Annette Funicello. I'm Frankie Avalon, and I'm Annette Funicello. Do you have any favorite lines that you want to leave with?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. There is one, I can't think of it because my brain doesn't work. You'll have to come back to me. I don't remember.
Yeah, I did mine. It's a bitch.
Well, I like the you and you at the end, and you and you and you and you, and then she puts the two guys together. That's so cute.
I love that. And he like flexes his pecs.
Uh-huh.
I love it. I don't know why she had to put the little person with the bigger girl. That was shady.
Oh, come on. You always had
It
to
was
do
the
that back then.
80s. It was the 80s. It was, yeah.
Because opposites are funny. Opposites are funny. Monkeys and opposites are funny. Yeah.
I did. Monkeys. I love it. But thank y'all so much for being here. And
Thank you.
thank y'all for
Thank
just
you.
sharing your love and y'all's wisdom and y'all's knowledge of nostalgia with me, because I just learned so much from y'all.
Well, growing up in the 80s, nostalgia as a kid was all we had.
And it took a long time to get to New Zealand. It didn't happen at this, it was usually about a year or 2 years later. But yeah.
There you go.
See y'all later.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.